Mamas, and welcome back to another episode on the Mamas Who Brunch. I'm your host, Jelena Reed, and I'm so glad that you've joined me today. I want to talk about faith in the workplace because I think it's important for women to feel secure in their faith going into the workplace. I think working in the public has really impacted my life in a great way. And I know a lot of ladies are unsure about going into the workplace or nervous because they feel like their faith will be compromised. And that's a very personal decision, of course. But I want to talk about how you can walk in integrity as a Christian woman in this public world, because most of us will be out in the public. It's very rare now that women just get to stay at home or raise kids, which if you do, that's wonderful and great. This episode is not for you. This is for women that work out in the public. For the last 13 years, I have worked in the public. Now I work from home, but I do go out and visit my customers several times a week. Most of my meetings are remote, so I have tried to find ways to let my light shine, which I know that's a cliche terminology, but I've tried to find ways to show my faith and share with others without being intrusive, offensive, or off-putting. And I think a lot of Christians going into the workforce, and I say this because I used to be this way, we're very in your face about Christianity. And that is not something that's going to attract people to want what we have. It actually will deter people from wanting to listen to what we have to say. You know, shouting on the street corner, waving flags, having signs, yelling and screaming is not going to win people to Christ. And it doesn't do much for us either. And so in this day and age and this time frame that we live in, it's important to have relationships. It's important to show people that you care. It's important to be different. And that's always been my mindset going into corporate environments, is I want to be different. Looking different and being different are two different things. And I do believe in modesty. I believe in looking like a woman. But maintaining faith, integrity, and representing Christ is my number one concern. And I think that you can maintain your integrity and your faith and still be successful. And I want to talk through some of like the pitfalls that a lot of women fall into, especially because we work around men. And so I want to like talk about some safeguards there as well. So to open this up, I want to first say that many Christian women in work environments, they feel like their faith can't be openly discussed, and they feel like they live in two different worlds, church and work. I definitely have felt that way at times. And God calls us to represent him everywhere that we are. In Colossians 3:23, it says, "So whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not unto men." Our job isn't just to get paid and to support our families. It's also a mission field, because that's where we have the ability to witness. I'm not saying this because I am a professional in this area, because I'm not. It's something I'm actively working on. And that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is I want to find new ways to connect with those around me, because I'm not in front of people every day. I do work from home, which is a blessing. So when you're out in the public, there are pressures to compromise values. There's office gossip. There's opportunities where you're going to be presented with a good opportunity that may require some small fudging of information, or maybe some dishonesty or cutting corners. Maybe that's signing a document that you had nothing to do with to get credit. As an example, it could be a competition where there's a ton of pride and self-interest involved. You could be tempted to fit in with people. Maybe it's an environment where there's a lot of heavy partying. And then you may feel like you're pressured to hide your faith to avoid judgment. These are all real situations, and they happen. I think an important part of this is to making sure that you are in the right work environment and that you're in a place that's accepting. Because I have worked in some environments. Probably one of the things that I'll always remember when I was in my early 20s and I was a property manager in real estate, I remember going to Boston for a work trip, and my roommate got so drunk that I had to push her over so she wouldn't like choke on her own vomit. And that was when we roommated with coworkers, which I don't do that anymore. I get my own room for that very reason. But also on the same work trip, we as a group went out, and of course I'm like 21, like I'm not going to stay home and stay in my hotel like a fuddy-duddy. So I went out with everybody. We went to this like Irish pub, and We got dropped off in a van and then had no one to pick us up. And so I was like the only sober one at this event. Everybody was drinking. And I was trying to get like 15 or 20 adults to get back in the van to go back to our hotel. And it was not fun. Let me tell you that. When you're the only sober one around a bunch of drunk people, it's not great. And I've been in that environment several times because I don't drink and I go to work events and I travel for work. And sometimes it does happen, but I think in some instances I probably should have stayed in my room and I didn't. But I also didn't compromise. Like a lot of times I sat by myself. I got a Diet Coke. I kind of watched from a distance of people just acting crazy. And that's what I chose to do, and everybody's different. But for me, that's how I've kind of navigated some of those situations. And maybe it wasn't perfect, or maybe you don't agree with that, but you can definitely like maintain your integrity and not compromise on your values. And that's different for everybody. As an adult, I do go out to dinner, and then once people start getting too drunk or tipsy for me, I go back to my hotel room, and I am so happy to get in my bubble bath and go to bed. No problem doing that. Now that I'm almost 34, I don't care. I don't care anymore. And I'm all about sleeping because I don't get to sleep when I'm at home. So there's different things you can do to not compromise into those pressures. But again, I say this as somebody, I'm not an expert. And that's why I have this podcast for mamas and just general ladies. Like, we're not experts in this area, but we all go through things. And I think that integrity means doing what's right when no one's watching. And we can represent Christ many ways through honesty, humility, kindness, discipline. Having a good work ethic is a very strong Christian attribute. And, people are watching what we're doing. They watch us, what we do. They watch what we do. They watch how we react. A lot of times people base, if you're of a strong personality and you're a leader, people are watching you and they follow what you do. And a lot of the times they judge their own reactions based on how you react. So it's very important to remember that we represent Christ in this area. And I do think part of what has made me successful in the workplace is that I do have a Christian background and I do have Christian values, because I am a hard worker. I am giving. I do support people. I don't blow up at every little thing that happens. Do I handle it perfectly? No. There's days that I get mad. There's days that I blow up. There's days that I don't handle situations correctly, because I'm human, and I'll be honest in that area. I'm not going to tell you something that's not true. But my goal is to actively reflect Christ in everything that I do. And I think practical examples of a Christian woman's integrity in the workplace is that we refrain from gossip. Like, I just honestly try to stay to myself. If I hear somebody talking negatively about somebody else, not all the time, but I do try to just separate myself from that. I try to take responsibility for my mistakes, and that's another one. Owning up to maybe what we did wrong, and treating our coworkers with respect goes a long way. Working diligently, making sure that we're not taking advantage of the workplace in any way, and avoiding manipulating or being dishonest with other people. And then, of course, giving credit where credit's due, making sure that we're always thanking people, praising people for what they're doing for us. These are all small ways that we can show Christ's love in the workplace. And I think being an ear where somebody can come and talk to you. I have found myself many times being a listening ear for someone that just needed to vent and talk. I went to lunch last week with one of my customers, and he's going through a really hard time. And I don't even know how we got on the subject, but we started talking about faith and church. And he told me what church he goes to, and I told him what church I go to. And we talked about the Lord dealing with us in our lives through our family struggles. And that didn't come up the first time that I met this person. I've been out to lunch with him multiple times. And it didn't feel awkward or uncomfortable, because I do listen. If somebody does bring up faith, I immediately kind of jump on that. Not right then and there all the time, but sometimes I'll bring it back up. It's hey, I heard that you went to church. How was that? Or maybe they say what they did over the weekend. I'm I heard that you did, you took your kids to a Bible camp. Tell me about that. So I think you just build integrity with people over time. And anytime there's an opportunity, I think it's our responsibility to pursue that. And I do work with another Christian on my team, and we talk about the Lord. And if he listens to this, he can verify. Like, we'll talk, he'll call me and we'll talk about what God's doing in our life. And that's a blessing. I love that. I love those small moments that we can let our light shine and encourage somebody else. And I think it's making sure that we don't force it on people and that we just are an open door, that people can come and talk to us. We're a light to the world without being pushy that will drive people away. Growing up, I was, and this is a touchy subject, so I'm sorry if this is something you disagree with, but something that I grew up hearing was that people will be attracted to our religious experience by how we dress. And that's just not true. Nobody's going to be drawn to you because of how you dress. That is it's a propaganda tool to get young ladies to wear dresses, because I have been around many people wearing dresses and they didn't attract me to know more about what they have. And there's some cases where somebody saw somebody wearing a dress and they're like, oh my gosh, I wanted what she had. And that's just not, it's not from the Bible. That's just an opinion or belief. And I'm not saying that opinion is wrong. I'm just saying that that's not found in the scriptures. So if you want to dress modest and you want to, head to toe, have your head to toe covered because you feel like that will attract someone to Christ, you do you. But from my experience, that is not something that works, based on my experience. You don't have to force conversations. Your life is going to speak and what you do. It's not what you look like. It is how you act and how you treat people. I've also worked with people on the opposite spectrum where I worked with a Pentecostal one time at a fast food restaurant when I was a kid. And this Pentecostal girl was like so hateful. And I also wore a skirt. So I was the other girl in the skirt. And she was very hateful to people. She didn't talk like a Christian. She didn't sound like a Christian in her mannerisms and her actions. So in my opinion, your actions come first. And I do believe in modesty. So I just want to have that as a disclaimer. But your light shines in your works. And that's Matthew 5:16. It says, let your light shine so before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. And ways that you can shine is encouraging your coworkers, showing patience in a time where maybe it's stressful. Like there's so many situations that are intense. And I've had people ask me like, Jelena, you're so calm. Like, how do you stay so calm? And I think that's because I found calm in Jesus and I can have calm in conflict. And part of shining can also be being dependable, showing up on time, doing what's right. Honestly, turning in assignments on time. Like I'm in a corporate job. We have a ton of assignments and it doesn't look good if someone's always behind or they're always on the naughty list of not having something done. I wouldn't say that links to somebody's like spirituality, but it is a negative look if that person's not dependable and they're not there and they're not on their A game. And I think it's okay to even offer prayer as appropriate. People post in our space like, I'm sick, my husband's sick. There's situations that happen. One of my coworkers had a neighbor's house catch on fire because they had a gas leak and it exploded. And they posted a donation page and I donated a little bit. And I think stuff like that's ways that we can connect and we can show our faith with others and showing people that we care. And sometimes integrity does cost you something. Depending on the environment, integrity could cost you being left out of circles. It could cost you being left out of promotions or popularity. And you have to make sure you're in the right space. And I want to keep emphasizing that there are some workforces and some work cultures that we don't belong in as Christians, period. End of story. Like, I don't drink alcohol, so I'm not going to go work for a tequila company, period. End of story. Like, I don't believe in, I don't know what else I could share, but that's just an example, right? Like of something that I wouldn't do. I would not be a good fit for that role. You have to be in the right space where you feel like God can support you and you can make money and you can provide for your family and not like compromise your integrity. And we seek God's approval, not men, but we do have to have men's approval at times if we're going to get promotions. And I think part of that is I do think some of the Christian values that we have, like showing up on time, being dependable, being trustworthy, being honest, those applications also make you really successful in the workplace. I've used a lot of that in the workplace, and I think it's helped me with promotions in the past, because I am somebody that you can depend on. And I think it's important that that we honor God through those sacrifices in the way that we conduct ourselves every day. And you don't have to be perfect to represent Christ, and you don't have to do it all perfectly. I would just say, just don't give up, right? That's what I tell myself. Like, Jelena, there may be times that you don't represent Christ perfectly, but don't quit. Don't give up. 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And sometimes the work of the Lord is in our day-to-day life, our day-to-day workplace. And we can represent him in making sure that sometimes it's not the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it's the person that's not speaking that has the most impact. And so I think that that's something to remember too, is like, we live in a culture where everybody's demanding, like, tell me what you believe, stand for this, paint yourself red, like, go in the street and protest. And like, as a Christian, we don't have to do those things. As a Christian, I don't think doing nothing is good either. Like, I think we do have to promote God's work, but we don't have to tell somebody what side of the table we sit on or what side of the coin we believe. You don't have to give every person an answer. And I think that's an important thing as well. You're going to work with people that are very different from you in many ways. And it's okay that they're not just like you. It's okay. They can be different, and you can still love them and care for them. I don't choose someone's morality. I don't make those decisions for them. And I may not agree with them morally on everything, but it's not about me agreeing with them. It's their own life. And so I think that's like a big thing with Christians, is like, they want to change people and they want people to conform to be like them. And it's like, respectfully, that's not our decision to make. That's their decision. And we can be a light just by being who we are. And hopefully that will inspire them to want what we have and what we have to offer, which is Christ and his love, and not judgment and hate and oppression. Because that's not our place. We're not the judge, juror, and executioner. That's not our place. That's God's place. And we can promote righteousness by doing right and being right ourselves. And we're not here to change the world. We're here to change ourselves, and then hopefully change the world in the process. And that's an important thing to remember, being a Christian out in society. Another important piece of this that I brought up earlier that I want to talk about is being a woman in a male-dominated environment. And I'm very fortunate because that's the position that I'm in. I'm surrounded by men. I do have some really awesome women on our team, but most of the customers I have are men. Most of the places I'm in, it's me. I'm the only female. And I have manufacturing clients, I have retail clients, sports, entertainment, professional services, and I'm out there the only female. It's all men. And there can be a danger in that. I have a very professional work environment, and I'm very respected. But there were times in my past that men did try to flirt with me, or coworkers tried to flirt with me. I've had several times where, when I was like my early 20s, I was leasing apartments, and one of the construction workers like had my number and was trying to take me out on a date. And this man was like 50 years old. Not even joking. It's disgusting. But there are things that will happen to you as a pretty woman in the world, and you have to be on guard. And my downfall has always been that I'm just super friendly. And I'm not like oblivious to the flirtations. I think I just like ran right over it. I ignored it. And it did cause me problems when I was younger because I had to stop being so friendly. But I think as some safeguards for women in the workplace, especially if you're married, don't be alone with somebody of the opposite sex, and try not to. I mean, there's times that I can't really help it because I work with guys. But I think you have to trust your spouse and make sure that if something does happen, that you communicate it and make sure to shut it down, right? Like if something happens that's crossing the line where somebody's flirting with you, or just like you can tell, right? If they're talking to you more than other people, a lot of times a telltale sign to know if someone's flirting with you is if Instead of talking about your job or your work, they start to talk about you or each other. That's like a number one red flag. So it's important, if it ever crosses that boundary, to immediately put a boundary back up. And you don't have to be rude. You don't have to cause a scene. You don't have to report them unless there is a serious reason to. I'm saying just have precautions around your heart and yourself, because you will be around men that will try to flirt and talk to you and all those things. And that goes for single women that want to maintain that integrity, as well as married women, of course. So it's important to have safeguards. You have to make sure you're not too friendly. Make sure that if you do get somebody that makes a move, that you put a wall up. And sometimes you do have to say, like, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, I'm married. Like, immediately shut it down. If you don't shut it down, the door is open. You have to make sure to close that door. And then talk about your spouse. That's what I do. I talk about Brandon nonstop. Everywhere I go, everybody knows I'm married. Everybody knows I'm happily married, because I talk about him all the time. And he does the same thing with me. There's never a doubt in someone's mind that we're not madly in love, because we talk about each other 24/7. And it's another just small thing. Like, if you want to safeguard your heart while you're in the workplace, I think it's important to know and be aware so that you can make a plan. If you don't have a plan and you go into the workforce blind and you're approached and you don't know what to do, you could open up your heart. You could open up your heart. And it happens when people least expect it. And so it's important to have a safeguard in place, so that way when it does happen, you know what to do. So I want to give you that encouragement. Keeping your integrity in the workforce is possible. I've done it. And you decide your boundaries. I think you know yourself best, and you know what you need to do to protect your heart, whatever that looks like. I think another important thing that I've done in my life is to have unmovable boundaries of what's important to me. So like, my husband and I have talked and established those. So if there were an opportunity to come by that would offer me a lot more money, which has happened, but requires me to travel or spend less time with Brandon or less time with my daughter, that's an automatic no. It's not even up for conversation. And I think having that safeguard protects you, and it's basically having a North Star in front of you that if anything comes against that North Star or threatens that North Star, that you hold it in place. And as part of this conversation, that would be your faith and your integrity and your belief in Christ and your spirituality. That is your North Star. And if anything comes against that, you have to protect it with all your heart. And we guard our heart through prayer, reading God's word. I pray before I go into meetings and ask God to be with me. A lot of times, like if I know I have a difficult conversation coming up, I ask God to be with me. And I think that's a way that we can arm ourselves with that strength and make sure that God is with us and that we're depending on Him in everything we do. So I hope that this episode has encouraged you. I think that it's a very topical conversation because a lot of women are in the workforce, and you don't have to be scared or intimidated or worried about compromising your faith if you go into it with your North Star, your boundaries, and strengthen God. I think that's the most important part. Standing on the Word of God and being strong in Him, because He will support you through every difficult situation that you go through. So thank you, ladies, so much for listening. Mamas, I appreciate you joining, and please stay connected with me every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for a new episode on the Mamas Who Brunch. Thank you.